my name's Donny. I'm a customer data architect at Census. So what I do is I help prospects and customers like use our product to work on operational analytics. And kind of the title of the talk is kind of modern data snacks. Kind of like we'll use food. We have a bunch of M&Ms at the end of the talk or during if you want to go grab them. And like the point of this is to talk about kind of using operational analytics, walk through a couple of use cases, and how data can have a seat at the table within a business to move and just increase the leverage by building trust with within the organization. So kind of quick agenda. Like number one's like kind of that recipe, which is like the hub and spoke model of the modern data stack, basically using the data warehouse as the nervous system of an organization. Kind of like we'll talk through like a couple diagrams of like what that can look like. Number two is kind of like building the buffet, kind of how operational teams can self-serve data into their tools. And kind of we're going to talk about kind of use cases, the sales use case as well as the marketing use case. And then we'll kind of walk through 2 live demos. We'll kind of have like a halftime if anyone wants to go grab a drink of water or needs to walk out for a sec. And then we'll jump back in and walk through the marketing use case. And then we'll talk through kind of how operational analytics can be used for your career in data and for increasing like data visibility within the organization. We'll talk a little bit about the landscape, what else is already out there in terms of solutions or current ways that people are solving the problem. And then kind of throughout, like, feel free to interrupt me with questions if you have any, but we'll have a section for it at the end as well. Go ahead and get started. So what is operational analytics? Like at a high level, operational analytics is bringing that analytics that is already living in your data warehouse or in your data hub and bringing that into business tools that ops users are using and living in on a day-to-day basis. So commonly that's Salesforce in like the CRM use case, Zendesk or Intercom and like support, and then marketing, we're going to walk through a LinkedIn use case, but kind of Google ads, Facebook ads, being able to support all the different apps that a business uses. Connectivity is a super important part. And Census syncs that data from your single source of truth and from your BI tools into your operational tools. So if you'll see kind of like this overall architecture, you have like Fivetran as like that ELT spoking in to the hub. You have Segment also handling kind of that event ingest spoking in. DBT is just like a layer within your hub. And then Census is that spoke out into your business tools. And then kind of like thinking about kind of a lot of the different use cases and a lot of like there's a lot of data science and machine learning that's here. So like does this still count? Is this still operational analytics? Kind of if we have like some complicated data pipelines, we might use like a Kafka stream or Snowplow for event ingest. And the answer is like yes. Kind of we have an interoperable API that you can trigger within whatever your data engineering ecosystem is. We've like an operator for Airflow, a task for Prefect, and like we can work with Dagster as well. And kind of the key like architecture that's the same in this case is kind of having that centralized hub. And kind of for any analytics work or any data science, machine learning that you're doing, as long as that's coming into the hub, like that fits very well with our vision as an architecture. And you can send that into your different business and ops tools. And kind of like a great question is like, why is this important? Why would people want to do this? And the answer is just like the current process generally either looks like these two things or it doesn't exist. So number one is like there's a spaghetti stack of many different point-to-point integrations. Another side, like there's just a bunch of manual CSV uploads that happen in the tools. And like if you've ever come across like a download upload process with like data export 1, data export 2, data export 3, like it's probably a good signal that an operational analytics tool like Census might be good for you. And kind of with that spaghetti stack of point-to-point integrations, like you have to manage that scales very fast. So if you want to add a new tool, you might need to add on like 8 different integrations and kind of make sure that all the wiring is hooked up correctly, and you might lose some of that visibility and observability into those different tools. So that's what Census can give, is kind of that observability, as well as just building that out as a robust system that can last the test of time. So that's kind of like that first section. Any questions in terms of operational analytics and kind of why it's needed? Cool. You can kind of talk a little bit more about like that self-serve side and kind of what do business teams want to do with this analytics information, and why does data care about that too? So in terms of use cases, some common ones that we see is just being able to get like this 360-degree customer record, being able to have a view into like who your customers are, what they're doing within the product that's often not living in like the SaaS tools that a salesperson or a sales ops person is actually using. You don't have that same context when a salesperson is hopping on the phone with the customer. Like they might have to answer questions that we should already know. Another side is just consistent reporting and the amount of time that like a report from a different tool doesn't match up with the BI tool, or a report doesn't match up between multiple different tools. Kind of that hub and spoke approach can fix that by making sure you have the same information that's mirrored in all of your different systems. And the third use case is like a specific one, which would be like lead scoring. So kind of more thinking about product-led growth and how can you actually leverage different information about product usage to identify sales leads that then you could go ahead and reach out to. So any questions on kind of like these sales use cases? If not, I'm going to kind of walk through a demo of the product. Cool. Sorry, I'm going to find my mouse. There we go. Okay, cool. We're going to go ahead and jump into models. This is the Census UI. Kind of at a high level, we have kind of a couple of different components here. This is the connections tab. So the connections tab, you'll connect your data source. And then kind of in terms of that connectivity pillar that we talked about, you want to go ahead and like a pillar is that we want to be able to support all the different business apps that you'd want to use. So we can kind of scroll down and take a look at some of these. But the two that we want to talk about today are Salesforce and LinkedIn ads. Something that's worth flagging here too is that we have the ability to customize, we have a custom API. So if you want to build out an integration that is not currently supported natively, you can still gain a lot of that observability and that alerting from Census with the flexibility of building out your own custom API. And we have some starter code to do that as well. If the system that you need data in is not currently natively supported, same thing with Webhook. So we have like that custom API integration right here, and then as well as that Webhook. Any questions about kind of like the different apps or the connectivity pillar? Cool. Just gonna go ahead and jump into models. You can see that like models you can think of as like queries, basically tables that you want to link up from the source that we want to go ahead and send into different destination systems. So in this case, like we can connect to a DBT project. Kind of you get that same observability that you might get that you can get at like in terms of where that's actually being sent into. Really, how that works is it's just running the compiled query to pull that from DBT. Additionally, like we have the ability to connect Looker looks, kind of using Looker's API to pull out that actual compiled query that then we can go ahead and use as a source as well. So especially this is useful if you have any business logic that's built in LookML that you like want to be able to send somewhere. You go ahead and hook that up through Census as well. Kind of for the use case that I want to talk to today is just like using this contact table. So it's this kind of big company that I called Jaffle-Gaggle, and it was like a DBT project that I worked on. But basically, you can think about it like a kind of like a B2B place where we have like users and customers that place orders, and then we want to go ahead and send that data into Salesforce. So you'll see like we just have a couple of users. We have user ID. We have like their corporate email as well as like username. A couple of just data points that might be typical of what might come from your product database that's in your data warehouse that Salesforce otherwise would have no record of. So in that case, I want to go ahead and set up a sink. So I'm going to go ahead and add a sink. I'm going to go ahead and connect this to the Salesforce. This is the sink. This is really the heart, the meat of what Census does. So the way like we pull from the source, we can connect to a model. We can also connect to like just like a warehouse table or view. But in this case, I want to go ahead and connect to that context. And then you want to select the object that you want to sync to. So when we think about kind of the different connectors that we build, the different integrations that we have, we really think about kind of the depth of the use case and being able to support the different customers that are using the different integrations that we have. So for Salesforce, we support kind of every object in terms of custom objects and standard objects, as well as the ability to like sync to multi-destination objects. So leader account or leader contact, depending on the different flow that you might have on the Salesforce side. Kind of our documentation kind of will show what objects we support for the different integrations that we have, as well as like which behaviors that we have. So I want to sync to the contact object. Sorry, it's really tough. Let me see. Cool. So I want to sync to, in this case, just to the contact object, and then we have to define kind of how we want this sync to behave. So in this case, like, do I want to, if this contact already exists, I want to update it. If it doesn't, I want to create it. So I'm going to do it like that. Basically, we have to define kind of how we want the data from your table or from your data warehouse to be joined to that object in the destination. And for this case, I'm just going to use an external ID, but oftentimes you see that being a user email or like an external ID that would come from your product database. And then first off, any questions here in terms of like the sync behavior? Yeah. But basically, we have certain protocol, certain endpoints, so that endpoints that you have to expose, that then would handle that logic. So if this primary ID column, if that's duplicated or if that's null, we won't send it. But those were valid nulls in that case because that user had placed it. So like they didn't have any order data for them. So that's fine. We can send over. We need to send that empty. But in terms of the unique identifier column, like that. And then if the destination API rejects a record because of the data value, we'll surface that as a rejected record. Does that make sense? If it fails the invalidation check, it would stop it. Yeah. We will not send that message. But yeah. So that's that mapping step in terms of mapping column. Then like we have the ability to choose any of the different fields that we want to go ahead and sync over, including like lookup fields. So if you wanted to look up kind of from a contact to the account that should be tied to on the Salesforce side, which is like a super common use case for a lot of different services. That's something that we want to be able to support. But in this case, like I already have the field set, like the names match for what I want to send over. So I just want to go ahead and like choose these. You'll see that like to Samir kind of to talk about a little bit more about your point in terms of like that data validation check. You can see that like we have these little icons here in terms of like making sure that we're sending the correct data type from your source to the correct data type in your destination. So that's another layer that we have here. We want to, and something that we also enable here is to be the ability to run a test. So running a test would run a sync, but would only send one record over to the destination. So yeah, so that would be like if you wanted to, if like, great, like I've for certain services that might not have a sandbox or development environment, you might not want to kick off a full sync, but you'd want to just send over one record and see how that actually looks in the destination. And then you could just make sure that that looks good. And then cool, spot check, and go ahead. Yes. Exactly. Any question on the field mapping or any of the behaviors for the syncs? Kind of one thing that I'm going to flag here too, that we're not going to talk about specifically today, but this is like the entity sync, kind of syncing to a noun, like a noun as in a contact in Salesforce. There's another concept which is like events, so like Facebook conversion events or a mixed panel event that we also have the ability to sync to. So those would be like we would append that to the destination. That we also see a use case for in terms of whether it's like events that you would capture through Snowplow and you have funneling into your data warehouse, or events that you would get from a transactional database and then translate towards a synthetic event. So if you have like an order creation date that you would have in your transactional database, but you don't have like your event hooked up, you can just call that event like order created, and then send that over as an event to the different systems that you'd want to. That's a use case that I've been seeing a lot more lately as well. Cool. I'm just going to go ahead and kick off the sync. Kind of, this is like, this is going to populate this dashboard of just like contacts here with kind of like the relevant information. And like this is can be super relevant within organizations, especially when the ops users are like finding that things aren't matching up within their systems to like the the analytics or the dashboards that like they might be pulling from. So being able to have kind of like the sync creation be fairly streamlined and fairly straightforward for these ops users to be able to self-serve information, but like with kind of the quality check of it being a DBT model or it being like a data team approved model. That's kind of where we see like that gourmet buffet idea of the data team adding those quality checks before that actually can go down into the downstream system. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But just want to talk a little bit about kind of some of these configuration here. So we have the ability to just set this up on a schedule. Go ahead and set this up on weekly, daily, hourly, up to every 15 minutes, continuous. Continuous is like kind of micro batches. We would scan the warehouse every 1 to 2 minutes, and any changes that are detected will we'll go ahead and send that over. And yeah, that's how that works. And the way that we're able to do that is we will have a state tracking schema within our customer's warehouse, and that way, kind of, we store the snapshots of the mapped columns of the data, so we can do the diffing logic within a warehouse, and like we don't store any of your data at rest. Yeah, totally. So we do, it's the data warehouse will do like a selected step to pick up the changed rows on the data warehouse side, and then we'll just go ahead and send those over. So we don't need a column or a timestamp for last updated app. We just need the values that will actually compare. And kind of data warehouses like can handle these for very high volumes of data very fast. Did that answer your question? Yeah. We also have the ability to like kick off a sync via dbt cloud, or like kind of that interoperability piece that I was talking about earlier. You can go ahead and use kind of an API trigger, just sending a post to this endpoint. We'll go ahead and kick off a sync. And you can have that live within whatever ecosystem or orchestration layer that you have. Looks like this sync probably has gone ahead and finished, but before that, get like an activity log on the sync in terms of like, great, I just created this. And then you have the ability to configure alerts. So if a sync fails, all the way up to different thresholds for how successful a sync is, to actually kick off an alert that you would get through Slack, through email, or Slack or PagerDuty or wherever you'd like to get notified if something fails. Great. So it looks like the sync is finished up. Kind of, this is that invalidation check. So if any records are like have duplicates in that mapping column, that they will like be flagged and not sent over. And then kind of any rejected records, like this one. Like this one has a comma in the email address. And so this gets rejected by Salesforce, and we're able to reject that at the record level as opposed to like the batch level. So the rest of the batch succeeded, but this one hadn't. This failed, and this is for debugging purposes. Yeah. It would have to be corrected in the data warehouse today. Something that we're excited about doing as well is kind of with that write access that we have to that schema for that state tracking. We're like in the process of enabling like writing back these rejected records into your warehouse, so you can have the record there, and then if you wanted to surface that and be like, okay, cool, like this is the ID of the record in that table that I would need to adjust, that you can kind of like add that to a workflow as well. But yeah, does that answer your question? Cool. Any more questions on the sync history piece? Oh, cool. Just go ahead, refresh this. Great. So we have, so like these are like those nulls, right? Like the people that haven't actually placed orders, like those would come in here as just dashes. And the reason um, why this is so important for like a salesperson to get their data within a tool like this is so that they can kind of slice and dice it and do whatever they want to do with their sales workflow within a tool that they can actually take action on. So like if I wanted to just go ahead and like just group by like that's grouping by the most recent events. So it's not that helpful. But yeah, like this is like the specific days that these contacts were actually active or these users. And then like I can click into here this record, see like some of that information, and then like as for a salesperson, I can go ahead and actually take actions. If I want to log events or add follow-up tasks, I can do that, as well as kind of configure workflows in these tools that sales ops people are often thinking about, and that actually like they basically live in these tools from that perspective, and kind of the data team and the ops team like this can bridge this gap such that like if a new field is needed to be added here, you go ahead into configuration, and then you can just go ahead and quickly add a field versus needing to edit an existing pipeline to go ahead and add that on. So it's fairly straightforward in terms of a salesperson that might want to jump in and add data that would be coming. Cool. Any questions about the kind of the sales use case that we can kind of answer now? That was kind of like the sales piece to the demo. So kind of like just wanted to call like quick halftime. If anyone wants to go grab water or something, feel free. You want to grab M&Ms? Happy to answer any questions. We're going to be talking a little bit more in depth about like the sales use case next week. I'll be leading that as a webinar, which will be super fun. And then we also have the ability to kind of sync yourself to Swag. If you want, you just go in and then like edit, and you'll use kind of that custom API for us to send you a SQL T-shirt. Say everyone at the conference. Yeah, it's kind of like our inverse bar chart. You can go. You can choose your next view. Okay. Okay. Um, uh, we're we're gonna go ahead and kind of get started with the marketing use case. Thanks for the halftime. It was nice to chat and hang out. Kind of like want to talk about kind of like what we talked about, like what sales does with operational analytics. Now I want to focus a little bit more on like what marketing does with operational analytics. And a big piece is around kind of segmenting in audiences and kind of like customer lists. So if you think about like use cases, you might want to exclude your current customers from like spending to get them to click on ads or to show them ads. You might want to like leverage lookalike audiences to like allow like Facebook or Google or Snapchat to try to find users that look like those users that you already have. You might want to like you might have like a renewal coming up for a customer, and you want to like have like hyper targeted marketing campaigns at like renewals or potential upsells for your existing customers. Or like you might want to use those conversion events that we were talking about, like actually placing an order, completing your onboarding flow, kind of deeper in the funnel moments that you can go ahead and kind of set up an offline conversion event. We're going to go in like a couple weeks. We have like a little bit more in depth, another webinar about like kind of operational analytics for marketing. But I'm excited to kind of walk you through using that same customer list and then syncing that into LinkedIn for the potential for showing ads. So let me see where my mouse is. Yeah. Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to that Jaffa context. So you'll notice we have this status here. And what this status means is like it's basically the data team being able to stamp approval of a model or of like a SQL query or a model that might come from DBT, and that exposes the ability to create a segment. And what a segment is basically just the ability to kind of use a no-code builder on top of like an already existing data model that's already living in your data warehouse. So a time we see this often with like marketing users that want the ability to just create audiences and audience lists that they might not know SQL, but if they have like the list of customers with all of the different metrics that you might want to have, they could go work off of that to create their different audiences and sync those into different business tools. So like I have like number of events greater than 25. We can support a number of different data types. And like we have like the less than 120 days ago. Like you want a Boolean, like that also can handle. You can functionally think about this like a where clause at the end of a SQL query. But any questions here on kind of segments? Yeah. Absolutely. So if a data type that will be flagged, that will be flagged at the synchronization layer. If like you have formatted, I can give you an example, an iterable, for example. They don't have a date type. So if you have like a year, month, date, and all the different types depending on the different sources. So that's part of like when we add that on, add on an integration source, something that we look for and make sure that we have proper mappings to ensure that we never lose any data. Yeah, great question. Cool. I'm just gonna go ahead and set up a sync. So you can see that like another important part of this in terms of like these segments and in terms of like operational analytics being the same spoke is that you can reuse that definition across a number of different channels. So I already have this being synced into Google Ads. I'm going to configure it for LinkedIn ads. So I have this just as my new data source. I'm going to go ahead and select LinkedIn. I'm going to go ahead and select, this is a user list because these are my users. And then we need to choose like that identifier again. In this case, like I have that email. So I'm going to go ahead and use that email. For many of the marketing use cases, they like only accept SHA 256 hashed data. So you can either give Census your unhashed data, and Census will hash it for you in flight, or you can also have it pre-hashed, and then we just won't touch it. We'll send it as is. And then you have like different like identifiers. Like we support different identifiers for every different object. But in this case, so I just want just the email. Select that email. And then we have the ability here to be able to add that to an existing user list that comes from LinkedIn, or the ability to create one. So like I can just go ahead and create like engaged users, do like spreadsheet M&M, and that will go ahead and create that as an audience in LinkedIn, and I just go ahead and pull that up. So this looks like this. Like basically what you can do in LinkedIn is you can have this be a user list, and then on top of that, you can configure your different audience logic that you'd want for the different ad campaigns. But let's go jump back here. Great. So I have that. I want to just go ahead and add like first name, last name. The way that these advertising tools work is that you'll pass it like a unique identifier and then as much personal information as you have. And then these tools will match based on like their own internal data sets to be able to identify like to like handle the resolution between what you know about a customer and what these tools know, so that they can target those people. So that's why you hear about like match rates and whatnot in these advertising use cases. You can go ahead and send a test, but I'm just going to go ahead and kick off the sync for this segment here. And I'll go ahead and create it. One thing that we often see is like when we have like a sliding window, like this filter that I have from this segment, is that we'll have you can configure a mirror sync. And what a mirror sync does is like if a user no longer meets the criteria for that segment, a sync will go ahead and delete that from that audience in the destination. So that like if you have like a 4-month window and someone had ordered like 3 months and 29 days ago, and like they're in the list, and then like it syncs again in like 4 days, like that user would then be deleted from that list because it no longer meets that criteria. Really common case that we see with a lot of these advertising destinations. Cool. We have like, just kind of the alerting. I mean, any questions in terms of kind of like this advertising use case? This is one that like, remember that if we go back to that slide, this is often one that this is the case for either a marketing ops person or the marketing team themselves. A lot of CSV downloads and a lot of CSV uploads that Census can just help automate and kind of add that quality control. And it's a very straightforward for data to get an easy win with the marketing team. To like have this run on a schedule, have this be automated, use your first party data that you already have.
Once you send the data to LinkedIn, like is that like, so it knows who that user is that you pulled the data about. Can you actually directly send that person that ad, or is it only like
So,
like, I don't like I'm trying to there's one thing about that saying people say, hey, we'll check it.
no, you can have it like be targeted towards. My understanding is that you can only show ads to specific audiences. Like if you wanted to do like account-based marketing, my understanding is that you can do that based on like certain accounts that you might want to advertise to, or like that audience plus like lookalikes of that audience. But like that's my best understanding. I don't know if Fish, if you know.
Yeah, I'm not like that would be the use case. Yeah. So you could sync like 18 individuals, say, I mean, LinkedIn, Facebook, all the advertising platforms allow you to do a CSV for APM or I mean, just think about it more on the consumer side. So forget LinkedIn for a second. LinkedIn works very similar to Facebook, but the way that it, many of you know, I used to run a console. So you would take effectively the list of customers there, and then you could do, essentially, like you said, very targeted marketing to that group, like effectively retargeting. And you could do lookalikes as a choice. But the way that I would do it is this messy CSV to the right. And by the way, this is like I was doing console selling 10 years ago. Like you would upload a CSV of all of those people. So this is an optimization. And imagine you sold more bottles. You sold something more than I sold bottles of hot sauce. It would become pretty more. I love CSV data export 8 parentheses. How many that's the customer list that you want.
Exactly. The most recent, that real. I'm glad you appreciated that. Cool. Go ahead and well, first off, I want to just go ahead and partner. There's another piece here, which is that like these audiences take time to build. So like that match process, like you can like this customer list is created, but LinkedIn has its own matching algorithm that it has to run to go ahead and do that. So you'll see like I uploaded those audiences 2 days ago, but now they're ready, and then like it'll give you a rough estimate of how many people fit that audience. In Facebook, it'll give you a match. In Google, it'll give you a match rate. I think Facebook will also give you a match rate as well, in terms of who they're able to identify. Great, and then like, kind of like to touch on that point as well, like these audiences, these entities, like in terms of this logic, you want to be able to have that synced into all of your different tools. So not only just LinkedIn, but maybe Google or Facebook or Snapchat, TikTok or Bing, like and this is specifically important because you will always have access to your user data, like with like whatever the user data that you put in, like that you might need to sign up to an account, you might need an email, you might get some of that personal information anyway, and kind of like with like kind of some of the cookie tracking and that browser tracking, like you have you always still have that data in your warehouse, that like you're able to like make that customer data work for you in this way. Any questions here in terms of this marketing use case? If not, I want to share. Let's see if this works. The audio here. Fingers crossed. No.
The genesis of data. When my coworkers always said that I'm a data angel because I previously thought I was, elf on the shelf, like the little elf in Santa's factory delivering the data. But I'm actually like, he rebranded it. He was like, you're a data angel. I'm like, oh, I never thought of it that way.
Such a good reminder that so many people in a company, it's like you're bringing them something they don't have. So it's like it feels like magic from the heavens. Oh,
exactly.
she brought us the data. And then eventually they'll get used to it, and then they'll just complain when the data's broken. But
exactly.
At first, it really does feel like this gift.
Yeah.
So this was from a recent podcast, the SQL show that Census puts on with our CEO Boris. And this is Jessica Cherney. She's she does data analytics at Ironclad, which is a customer of Census. She also leads a great Slack community of like women in data called Data Angels. So shout out to her. But I do want to talk about like that in terms of like being like the data elf on the shelf, and kind of this concept of like being able to bring like this data to ops users, and how important and like how much of a gap there is that can be bridged by this concept of operational analytics. And
This
like
is the genesis of data.
Come on, there it is. Like operational analytics is this bridge that lines up those two that gap between like the data and the actual data practice, like the users of the data within an organization, finance organization, customer success, logistics, like all of these different components that work within a business. They need to consume data, and there are processes that can be optimized by using the right kind of analytics. Additionally, like that request and like that complaining when the data is broken, that data, the fact that data team has to respond a lot to operational requests, if the ops users are able to self-serve that data from a trusted source, like if like all of those Salesforce dashboards, all of that marketing data has the stamp of approval for what is the definition of a customer, and what is like the definition of product usage, like there are less quality issues that might happen, less data mismatching, and like you can approach self-serve in a way that will give the data at the fingertips and the tools that ops people need using. And additionally, like with that observability functionality, with like the data typing, not sending over duplicates, with being able to alert when things fail, and being able to like be resilient with dealing with the post APIs for these systems that are super unreliable. It's building agile, like adaptable, resilient systems for the long term. That like you don't need to build out an integration for each different tool. You can let Census handle like the observability, the alerting, and kind of the headache of integrating with your different systems. And that will enable you as a data person to focus more on, to move from just kind of measuring like simple KPIs, like what is our customer acquisition cost, kind of what's our channel-based NRR, what are our sales numbers, to be able to like move them, to use operational analytics to build trust within an organization, to be like at the table talking about how do we lower our customer acquisition costs, how should we think about our data definitions, how do we want to increase our revenue and our revenue retention rate, what are some strategies that actually put this into practice, and how can we operationalize the insights that we have. So often data is like not brought to that discussion when there's a ton of truth and information that the data team can add within the organization in this context. And operational analytics is a way to build that trust with those stakeholders. Any questions about this? Cool. Great. So kind of why is operational analytics different? And I'd say that there are three main components to what, like in terms of existing solutions that are out there. Like one is kind of a custom integration that might be like sometimes I hear it described as like Python code wrapped in duct tape in terms of just integrating different systems. You might have that like maybe using like different frameworks or SDKs of services. But there's a lot of maintenance cost to open source or home built systems. You need to build it, you need to maintain it. When something breaks, you gotta like hop in and like solve why. You also like need to build out alerting or resiliency. At least for many of the systems that I built, I did not build out proper alerting systems or resiliency. So I spent a lot of time when something failed, like reworking why it failed. Spent a lot of time playing data detective in that way. And then like you just need to deploy a new integration. You need to build a new integration for every new tool that you want to add. Another one is like customer data platforms. So why is that different? Like what are like pieces here is like that once you turn on a stream that comes from a CDP, like it's on. Like you turn on and like the hose starts going. And these are event-based systems. So like they happen at like a one event, like a click, page view. What are they really good at? They're really good at like event capture and identity stitching. But they weren't designed to handle or give observability into uploads into tools, imports into different data systems. And like oftentimes like costs will scale as data volumes scale. So as your customer base is growing, like the cost for CDP often grows proportional to the growth rate of your customers, almost penalizing you for like being successful. And then kind of like iPaaS or kind of point to point, similar like event-based general model. You don't have as much observability into when they fail. They tend to fail silently. And you don't have like that kind of holistic observability features or kind of like reliability when things fail. And kind of how is OA different? Like operational analytics pulls like the most recent data from the definitions of the hub. You don't have to like fix bespoke integrations at each different point to point. New integrations can be configured and synced in minutes. We just walked through 2 use cases, Salesforce and LinkedIn. We did that probably all in 10 minutes tops. So you see like as long as you have the data living in your data warehouse, you can go ahead and get that set up right away. Another piece is that costs are predictable. They don't penalize your business for growing. The Census's cost model is based on destination fields. So what are the columns in a table that you are syncing over to the different destination objects? Doesn't depend at all on data volumes, and it doesn't depend, there are no hidden fees regarding that. And then like that observability, alerting, scalability, that's all built in within the architecture, such that like you don't have to worry about if things fail. Like Census can just take care of that for you. Great. Like thanks for joining. A quick shout out to our operational analytics Slack community that we have that Parker is a member of and is leading. And like feel free to sign up for a free trial and feel free to ask me any questions. It was great chatting with you today. Really appreciate it.